It impacts nearly 30 million victims worldwide. Modern-day slavery is a scourge in the developing world, but it's also a problem affecting every single country in the world. Could it be unfolding in your own community? I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. The modern-day slave trade is one of the fastest-growing industries in the world. The United Nations estimates millions of men, women, and children are enslaved around the globe, generating $32 billion a year. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, human trafficking is tied with arms dealing as the second-largest criminal activity in the world, second only to drug dealing. The exact number of human trafficking victims is unknown, but the United Nations International Labor Organization estimates today there are between 20 and 30 million enslaved and exploited people worldwide.
It ought to concern every person because it is a debasement of our common humanity. It ought to concern every community because it tears at our social fabric. It ought to concern every business because it distorts markets. It ought to concern every nation because it endangers public health and fuels violence and organized crime. I'm talking about the injustice, the outrage of human trafficking, which must be called by its true name, modern slavery.
Human trafficking is truly a worldwide problem. A U.S. State Department report shows documented cases of forced labor and commercial sexual exploitation in 188 countries. A United Nations report found women make up the majority of the victims, accounting for between 55 and 60% of all global cases reported between 2007 and 2010. Women and girls together account for about 75% of the victims. 27% of all victims are children. The reason behind the trafficking? The report found sexual exploitation accounts for 58% of all cases worldwide, while forced labor accounts for another 36%. But the trafficking cases, specifically for forced labor, have doubled over the past 4 years.
There's a lonely voice against slavery.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry believes America's leadership is vital in combating human trafficking around the globe.
And there are countless voiceless people, countless nameless people except to their families or perhaps a phony name by which they are being exploited, who look to us for their freedom and for the possibility of life itself. It's no understatement to say that we are working to tackle an issue that millions of people assumed had been dealt with a long time ago.
Before the adoption of the UN's Trafficking in Persons Protocol more than 10 years ago, several countries did not have any legislation addressing the problem. Today, 134 countries and territories worldwide have criminalized human trafficking. And while global legislation has changed dramatically over the last 10 years, the number of convictions for human trafficking remains very low. 16% of these countries did not record a single human trafficking conviction between 2007 and 2010.